Okay, so we've been doing this series of trips taken in winter to try and alleviate our frustration with being stuck inside and unable to get out and film. Now, we started by making a thing of this more deliberately last winter with some trips, somewhat hampered by a van writing off our car in January. You can see how that occurred a couple of episodes back. We have got more to come from last winter. We've also stitched in a couple of bits from this year. I'd forgotten about this trip. In fact, I wasn't even sure if it was going to be an episode. It was from a couple of years ago now, but the more I thought about it, it was pretty much the perfect example of what we've been trying to do. Getting out in winter, elements be damned, and it just worked as a pretty great time with a small group of us. As with all the episodes so far, let's start with previous experience required. For a while, I felt that the Peak District was a bit of a hole in our exploration. We're somewhat rectifying that. For all the big cities, they all have their nearest green spot where families or, mostly people with cars can get out of the city and rather than just walking in a park or a tiny slither of woodland, can get into something that feels sufficiently removed to authentically feel like the countryside. For Southampton, it's the New Forest. For Bristol, it's the Cotswolds. And for both Manchester and Sheffield, the Peak District is it. We had ever so briefly stopped off there on our way back from Edinburgh. We spent a night in a surprisingly kind of unpleasantly warm room. Then early in the morning, we are out on our way up to see Mam Tor. Through the pandemic and after, this has now become known as this overcrowded spot where everyone's up there and they're all blocking the roads by parking up and down the verges. I don't actually know if folks have clocked that there's a major hill fort here, but I'm not about to begrudge people just wanting to get outside to a nice view. And certainly on a fine day, very hard to resist. Not far away, dropped into Castleton. Didn't go inside the castle, but did take a good look, as well as the Winnats Pass, bit of a photographer's favourite. It was turning into a great day. I was wishing we had longer to make the most. We briefly caught Castle Naze. It's this rather wonderful inland promontory fort. And on our way south, this one is well worth it. This is Arbour Low. It's a henge enclosure with a stone circle, though the stones are recumbent. So that was all great. Well, fast forward to March 2024. Jen is now very pregnant. And so I've not been out of the country for a while, and we just wanted a break. So we got some friends together and headed up to the peaks. And the weather forecast was not looking all that superb, but exactly as we've been espousing this whole series, it's just nice to be getting out anyway. Yeah, maybe it rains a bit, sure, we'll just make the most. Oh, and small note, because this was a little while ago, and we were still on the fence whether this would actually be an episode itself, or if we're just taking the footage and putting it towards our history episodes that we're building towards. There's just not as much interstitial footage as I'd usually like to work with. Oh, and if you don't know us, our area of interest is usually all things ancient, so with a cut-off at about 800 years ago. So if it's Norman, Saxon, Roman, Iron Bronze Age, or Neolithic, we're into it. Okay, title card. So we got on our way. We were travelling as a scatter of a few cars at different times in the day. Not much to show for much of the distance heading north, but we did stop off here in Warwick. You can see the weather was somewhat behaving itself, and we were catching this rather pleasing row of timbered buildings, which I think you'll agree are very pleasant. Of course, a huge part of Warwick is its castle. I'm not going to dwell on this too long, as we didn't actually go in. Warwick Castle has become this test case on the theme parkization of historical sites, and that's no accident. It's run by Merlin Entertainments, who own Alton Towers, Thorpe Park, all of that stuff. It's 39 quid a head to get in, and we know that since it's 2026, that price point is bound to be out of date in a few months' time, as it's inevitably jacked up even more. They seem to focus most on Halloween trails, Christmas light shows, and £5 hot chocolates. Just a worst of all possible worlds. It has a similar thing going on to Arundel Castle. It's certainly very striking in aspect, but as you look closer, it's not really a medieval structure. It was practically ruinous at the beginning of the 1600s and was transformed into a stately home that has the appearance of a castle, but mostly just because that looks nice, not because it was actually defensible anymore. And so its Norman origin, that we'd be most interested in, is pretty much buried in much later layers. So, well, there you go. On our way, and we arrived in the dark. Had a rather confusing time trying to locate which building we were actually staying in. It was on this farm that rents out various bits and buildings as group accommodation. It was pitch black, so not a good time to be filming, which is why you're seeing the footage from daytime later on. It was a nice little house with some gorgeous countryside around, and I do like the pond out front, but the ground around was so waterlogged we were scared we'd never get our cars out of the mud. The first morning, it was raining, but we opted to head out anyway. And there was just enough of a lull in the rain for me to have the camera out. We were starting on this moorland, a short way away from the Kerbar edge, and while ideal weather it most certainly was not, it got us a good first look. We had a couple of targets to hit. First of all, this is the Barbrook stone circle. It's a small circle, but it's modestly well preserved, with one stone distinctly larger than the others. Managed a good nosy at that, though you can see we had to tread carefully on the waterlogged ground. The rain started getting harder, so after about a 30-minute loop, people were heading back to the cars. I just briefly caught what has been labelled Barbrook 2. You can see that rather than a stone circle, this is actually the remains of a cairn. And as you start looking in the landscape, you're seeing more and more of these cairns, including this rather impressive one just a few yards from the stone circle. Would have been good to get a look at these from above, but the rain wouldn't allow me to fly. Okay, so back in the cars, the weather was definitely in a changeable mode as the rain stopped pretty soon after, and we were only barely round the corner and there was lying snow, which I had not expected. Also some incredible views to the mountains off in the distance to the west. Well, having stopped for a quick drink and a toilet break, we were back out, and this one is a bit unusual. A pleasant walk in a pretty incredible landscape, and we were heading for this low peak. This is Carlwark. It's really unusual. You can see it's surrounded by rocks, and this would already make for a great natural fortress. The rocks at the top were certainly spectacular. This is conjectured to have been a hill fort, possibly Iron Age or even earlier, but it has this really unusual feature. To the northwest, it has this wall. So, what to make of this? Well, the block size is unusually large. I mean, compare this to other forts with stone ramparts in either Northumberland or Somerset or elsewhere. They don't normally look like this. The interior has no discernible traces of Iron Age occupation, so pretty much all options are on the table, from Bronze Age when compared to local hill forts, or medieval, or just a folly from the last 200 years. All have been tabled. I honestly have no idea which to go for. But it was a nice walk, and the top made for some spectacular views. The rain started again as we wheeled back, which kept my camera stowed, but just as soon as it had started, the rain petered out. And since we were passing and there was a car park, we took a quick loop around Owler Tor. You can see a distinctly Dartmoorish look to all of this, the exposed rock hewn and seemingly twisted by the elements over the years. Now, we were overdue a good coffee spot, so we headed south, and this is the village of Bakewell. And yes, the almondy dessert does come from here. The village itself is certainly very pleasant. I was loving this little bit of early March blossom. To be honest, with both its charm and smaller size, I was almost relieved we were here out of season and on a day with not especially good weather. I cannot picture how rammed this would be at the height of tourist season. I'd got everyone seated and relaxed before I scooted off, because far from just being a tourist trap, Bakewell has some significant history. This is All Saints Church, and there's quite a bit to unpack here. In the churchyard are two pre-conquest crosses. I think what you're seeing is centuries-old soot pollution clinging to this one, but I could be wrong. It's from sometime around the 900s. The detail has survived pretty incredibly, and I can't unpack it all right now, so pause the video if you like. There's also this Anglo-Scandinavian cross. Both of these are believed to have been moved here from more remote sites, but nearby. And then in the porch of the church is this absolute treasure trove of medieval stonework, some of it pre-conquest with some very nice knotwork, some later medieval grave markers, some tiles, just all sorts going on. Was trying to snap it all, but couldn't take hours, so nipped back to the cafe. I don't recall this Bakewell tart being life-changing exactly. No slight intended on the good people of Bakewell. This was fine, but okay. Did just have a chance to catch this mott on the way out. As you can see, the weather over the town had brightened considerably, so all very charming. And I vaguely recall cooking something big for everyone that night. I can't actually recall. This is a couple of years back, and I am a gent who loves to plan a weekend away, so a few of the smaller details do get lost in the wash. Speaking of which, do check out the playlist. As mentioned up top, this is all about the smaller and more UK-based trips we've been up to. Anyway, got going in the morning. When we got to Stanton Moor, it was actually quite foggy, but as we kept walking, it lifted, and we really lucked out with the weather. I tried to get a look at the cairn here, but it was near invisible amongst the heather. However, a lot of you probably know why we're here. This is the Nine Ladies Stone Circle, the 9 part and the ladies part. These are all things that get tied to various stone circles up and down the country, including ones that don't have 9 stones at all. Normally with some sort of cautionary tale about cavorting on the Sabbath. My tone is probably failing to mask my disinterest in the last few hundred years of folklore that gets attached to these places. It's certainly a very attractive place and even better under blue skies. Doubling back, and the sunshine was offering great views in all directions. Just before heading back for home, I directed us to Wirksworth. It's a nice enough place, but a couple of curiosities here. This one is minor, but still remarkable. There's the remains of a medieval cruck roof that's sort of fossilised into the side of the building adjoining it. And while folks set out for a drink and a bite, I nipped into St Mary's. Now, the fabric of the church is not remarkably old, but some of the treasures it holds inside, I mean, just look at this panel. And if the dating is accurate, it's unbelievably early. It could have been carved before 692. It was discovered as part of a tomb when the church was being renovated in 1820. And as if that wasn't enough, there's also other Saxon work embedded around the walls. There's these rather puffy-looking figures known as the King and Queen of Hearts. Cute. Surrounded by other pre-conquest corbels and bits. There's even this panel, the Towed Man, if that's how it's said, apparently around 800 years old. And I've seen it suggested that this is the oldest depiction of a miner anywhere in the world. So, okay. The suggestion it could be even older. Well, with that, it was pretty much time up. Now, you can see this was not a comprehensive tour, so spare me from going in the comments and writing all of the things we haven't done yet. There's no shortage of you who may have noticed we didn't hit Dol Tor, and there's many more Saxon bits and pieces in the churches near here. Yet lots more to see. We were there in a tight time window, and I didn't want to drag the friends I was with to the most obscure spots, so I was mostly keeping it to the crowd pleasers. But you know, for a weekend with less than the greatest weather, to be honest, we were really getting 4 seasons in a day between the rain, sun and snow, so yeah, it just felt good to be there, and I'm impatient to get back. I've sketched a few plans to get back up there, and they haven't come together yet. I mean, at time of writing, there may still be time to get there this winter or into early spring, so I might be making another Grey Days episode pretty soon, I don't know. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the music in the background, it's ours. We make all the music for these episodes and you can catch it on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. We've got a bunch of playlists for you to check out. It's anything from the Hill Forts episodes last year, which was a massive undertaking, to an increasing number of episodes from Greece. We've kind of explored a whole bunch of ancient sites in the landscape there, so that's very much worth a look. And of course, there's this Grey Days playlist. We're also going to be making a Micro Adventures playlist, which to start with is going to be also sort of Grey Days episodes, but there's going to be more going in there besides. We've been doing lots over the last 18 months, so there's loads to go in there. Otherwise, if you catch us on Blue Sky, you can see what we're doing on more of a week-by-week basis, you know, because these episodes take quite a while to put together, but on Blue Sky, we can be posting kind of regularly. Otherwise, we'll catch you very soon.